Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Connect West Virginia training series. We're just going to go ahead and give about 1 minute for all the attendees to sign in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So good morning, welcome. If this is your first week joining us, we're happy to have you. If you are joining us for the 4th week, welcome back. We'll just go ahead and give 1 more minute so everybody can get signed in. Welcome. This is a time to grab your cup of coffee, grab a cup of tea. You've got about a minute, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Connect West Virginia training series. If you're just signing in for the first time with us, we're just going to give about a half a minute now, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, I can see it slowing down. So good morning. On behalf of the Connect West Virginia Planning Committee, I welcome you to the 4th training in a series of 5. My name is Melody Osborne. I serve as the Adolescent Health Initiative Coordinator for the Northern Panhandle of West Virginia, and I'm your moderator for this training series. All of these sessions are going to be videotaped, and they will be available on the FRIZ YouTube page, so look in the chat box for that link. So that if you want to view this or share it with people afterwards, you have that link. This training series is being provided with financial assistance as a grant through the Department of Health and Human Resources and has been planned and organized in collaboration between the West Virginia Adolescent Health Initiative, West Virginia FRIZ, West Virginia Free, and the West Virginia Center for Children's Justice. We would like to recognize and thank the West Virginia Center for Children's Justice for sponsoring the CEUs for today. You will be receiving 1¼ hours if you need that in social work, counseling, law enforcement, domestic violence advocates, nurses, psychologists, and addiction specialists. Lisa Carmelia's email will be provided for you in the chat box. So if you have any questions pertaining to CEUs, please feel free to shoot her off an email and she'll respond to you. Just to make it very clear for our educators that are online, you can go ahead and sign in on the sign-in sheet as well. Everybody who signs in and participates today receives a certificate of attendance, regardless if you need CEUs or not. So please go ahead and get yourself on the sign-in sheet, and you should receive that certificate of attendance, as well as your evaluation to fill out following this training. We will also put the evaluation link in the chat box, or look for that as well. If you are watching this webinar in connection with the graduate course, Selena will be on at the end of the webinar to go over this week's assignment and answer any questions that you have. As with previous weeks, she will be on afterwards. So if you have any questions about previous assignments or the assignment for today, please hang on afterwards, and she'd be happy to go over anything related to the graduate course with you. Everybody who needs CEUs, you know the deal. You need to get yourself on the sign-in sheet and you need to fill out an evaluation in order to receive your CEUs. So once again, if you have any trouble with the sign-in sheet or the evaluation link, just let us know. You can send me an email. Lisa Carmelia's email is in the chat box as well. We're happy to help you in any way that we can. Once again, the evaluation link will be provided this week in the chat box, and you will also receive that via email. So just relax. We hope you enjoy today's session. We do need to make sure you get yourself on the sign-in sheet and fill out an evaluation, but we're happy to help you out in any way. Certificates of attendance will be emailed to you following the session, so it is important that you get your name on the sign-in sheet so we have your email address. Question and answers, we're going to leave time at the end of today's session to have our presenter answer any questions that you have. So you'll notice there is a Q&A box. Feel free to put questions in that box during the session, but she will be answering those in the end of the session. So if you have any questions at all, just feel free to put those in, as I said, and we're happy to answer those towards the end. I would like to take a moment now to introduce our speaker today. Her name is Susan Harrison. She is the Executive Director of the CASA program in Tyler, Wetzel, Marshall, and Ohio counties. She is a personal friend, and I don't think I've ever met an advocate for children quite as passionate as my friend Susan. So I'm going to sign over the video and microphone to her. Please virtually welcome Susan Harrison.
Thank you, Melody. Good morning, everyone. Well, I know a lot of you were on last week with me, and so thank you for having me back. And we're going to expand on some of the conversations that we had last week. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. All right. So just as a way of introduction for myself, I grew up in a military family, moved around a lot. My parents were foster parents everywhere that we lived, and that became a passion of mine, working within the child welfare system. I got my undergrad degree up at Edinburgh in Erie, Pennsylvania, and then I headed down to WVU to get my grad degrees in social work and a master's in public administration. From there, I worked in the child advocacy centers as a forensic interviewer, and then 12 years ago, moved home to Marshall County with my husband, where he's from, and started working for CASA. So if you're not familiar with CASA, it stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates, and we work to represent the best interests of children in the that are in the foster care system. So we get to know the kids and their families, talk to their school teachers, and medical professionals and therapists, and then make recommendations to the court. So as Melody said, I have a 4-county region up here in the Northern Panhandle. And one of the things that I've really become passionate about during my time with both the CAC and CASA is prevention. How can we prevent child victims of abuse and neglect? And I run our Partners in Prevention team in Marshall County, and I'm on the one in Ohio County, and I work with families to try to increase the protective factors so that we can keep kids safe. So that being said, today we're going to be talking about online safety protocols for teachers, parents, and students. So I wanted to make a disclaimer. I'm not a teacher. I'm a social worker that teaches. So my job is to teach others how to protect children from abuse and neglect. I teach about the signs and symptoms of abuse and neglect and about their responsibility to report. I also teach about common boundary violations and how to create safer organizations by having rules in place that limit that one-on-one contact with children. I teach social work classes for West Liberty University, and this past spring, I experienced my first time doing online teaching. Like many of you, it was new ground to cover. And I started to realize we have to learn from the experiences. We have got to create new policies and procedures so that we can do a better job with future online learning. The other thing that happened during COVID-19 is that I had the pleasure of learning what online learning looks like as a mom. So I'm a mom of a 5th grade boy, and watching how that process unfolded also helped me realize that we need to have a conversation about how we can keep up with best practices for child protection within a virtual classroom setting. So definitely we know that in every school in every county across the country, the classrooms were all doing something different. Some kids were in Google Classrooms, some kids were logging into 100 different websites a day to access assignments. Some kids were face-to-face in Zoom meetings with their teachers. Some kids never saw their teachers' faces again after March 13th. So when I put together this presentation, I try to take all that into consideration, that we're really doing things differently all across the state and the country because this was new ground. Some things are going to apply to your school and some things won't. Hopefully you can take the new information, start applying it to whatever the future of school looks like. We don't know what the fall is going to look like quite yet. I also know we have social workers and counselors and other professionals on the call today. And so a lot of the concepts we're talking about today also apply in your work. Virtual therapy, telehealth appointments, virtual home visits. Those are all of the things that the people on the call are participating in. Looking at best practices means research. Today, the information I'm going to present is going to be information that I've gathered from Prevent Child Abuse America, Prevent Child Abuse West Virginia, Partners in Prevention, and from Darkness to Light. Darkness to Light's a leader in the child sexual abuse prevention, and it's definitely my go-to information for all things prevention related. So today, the two main topics we're going to explore are common adult boundary violations, and then looking at online safety protocols. How do we take child protective strategies from our regular course of our practice and then move that over onto an online, whether it's online schooling or online therapy or online home visiting. When I'm talking about the safety protocols, I'm really going to just do foods for thought, places for you to start, things for you to think about researching, policies and procedures that you may need to create and enact within your organization. And we will save questions for the end. I can't see the chat box while I'm presenting, so I'll just need you to save those questions and we'll definitely get to them at the end. So even though your students are not coming into the classroom right now, you still may be a safe adult for them. You might suspect abuse and neglect. A student might reach out. They might disclose to you. We need to be prepared to report and respond. As a teacher, counselor, home visitor, advocate, you are a mandated reporter and you're legally responsible for reporting suspected or disclosed abuse. You should have a plan. You should know your agency and your school's reporting policies, know how and who to report to, and be prepared to support the child. If you haven't had a mandated reporter training, like what we did last week, we really talked, that's what we focused on last week. I suggest that you reach out to your FRNs, your CACs, your CASA programs, your partners in prevention, and make sure that you and your agency has had a class in mandated reporting. You can also go to the Department of Ed's website. It's very simple. You can just Google the Department of Ed, child protection, and you'll come up with the slides, and you could go through those modules. All right. So today I have a series of different videos. They're very, very short little videos. This one's only 1.5 minutes, just as introductions to the topics we're talking about today.
In the United States alone, 1 in 10 children will experience sexual abuse before their 18th birthday. That's 42 million adult survivors of sexual abuse. The impact is enormous, with financial, social, and health consequences that affect us all. The good news is that we know prevention is possible. We have the knowledge to tell a different story. What if that one child had adults in their life who had the skills to prevent child sexual abuse? What if just one adult knew the facts? That adult could reduce the risk for abuse to happen in the first place. Or what if just one adult knew how to talk about body safety? They might talk to that child about boundaries and what to do if they felt unsafe. Or what if just one adult knew how to intervene if they saw something they felt uncomfortable with? Or if the worst was suspected, knew how to file a report? We can write a new story for children and create a world where no child experiences sexual abuse. That would be millions of happier and safer childhoods. Prevention is possible. We can create a community where child sexual abuse cannot thrive. You can help. Get involved in your community's prevention efforts by contacting your local child protective organization.
All right, so we're going to start off talking about common adult boundary violations. And that language isn't always familiar to people. What do we mean by boundary violations? Essentially, we're talking about the red flags that adult behavior should tip off to us. It's important to remember, and you're going to hear not just me say this, but also in some of the videos, not every person that seems too good to be true is a bad guy. But if we don't have good policies in place, it's really going to be hard for us to sort out the good guys from the bad guys. We're going to review how a potential perpetrator gains access to victims. We're going to talk about the grooming process and how that starts with agencies and organizations, then moves to parents before it ever moves on to the kids. We want to remember that perpetrators are volunteering in child programs. It sounds a little crass for me to say this, but people who want to gain access to children don't volunteer in nursing homes, they volunteer in child agencies. They come to your baseball associations, they're in your Boy Scouts, they're putting themselves in positions in your churches so they have access to children. So let's talk about some of these red flags.
Why was I willing to do this? You know, if you can stop the collateral damage here, as opposed to 18 years later, that makes a huge difference. And if you spare one child, I mean, people don't have a clue the ripples from one child. So you stop one source of ripples. I mean, that is huge.
I use that video to introduce why this work is so important and why we should make sure our community is trained in the prevention of child sexual abuse. That clip, as well as the other clips from today, are from the Darkness to Light website. And those of you that are doing the graduate credit, you're going to use those clips and then build on those clips with part of your assignment. So you guys are going to get a good opportunity to look at that Darkness to Light website. So there are stages of grooming. The first stage of grooming involves targeting the child. This is when perpetrators may target and exploit a child's perceived vulnerabilities, including emotional neediness, isolation, neglect, a chaotic home life, or lack of parental oversight. You know the kids that you work with in your school settings or as a therapist or whatever your job responsibility is, and you think of those kids and you think those kids have a stamp on their forehead that says needy or victim or neglect. Those are the kids that are easily targeted. Perpetrators must gain the child's trust and the caregiver's trust. Perpetrators work to gain the trust of parents and caregivers, to lower the suspicion and gain access to the child by providing seemingly warm yet calculated attention and support. The perpetrator gains the child's trust by gathering information about the child, getting to know their needs, and finding ways to fill those needs. So what do they do to fill the need? Once the perpetrator begins to fill the child's needs, they may assume a noticeably more importance in that child's life. So example, I saw you reading that new Superman comic. I'm going to go see the movie. I can take you to the movie. Perpetrators use tactics such as gift giving, flattery, giving money, and meeting other basic needs. They isolate the child. They use isolation tactics to reinforce their relationship to the child by creating situations in which they're alone together, babysitting, one-on-one coaching, special trips. They may reinforce the relationship with the child by cultivating a sense that they love and understand the child in a way that no one else can, even their parents. You can trust me because no one understands you the way I do. Once the emotional dependence and trust have been built, the perpetrator progressively sexualizes the relationship. This occurs through talking, taking pictures, creating situations in which they're both naked, maybe getting dressed or changing for going swimming. The adult exploits the child's natural curiosity and trust using stimulation to advance the sexual nature of the relationship. Have you ever masturbated? I can show you how good it really feels. Once sexual abuse is occurring, perpetrators commonly use secrecy, blame, and threats to maintain the child's participation and continued silence. In order to maintain control, perpetrators are using emotional manipulation. They make the child believe that they're the only person that can meet their emotional and material needs. The child may feel loss of the relationship or consequences if they expose it. They might think that that's more damaging and humiliating than actually continuing this unhealthy relationship. The perpetrator could say things like, if you tell anyone, we'll both go to jail. We won't be able together. If you tell on me, something bad could happen to your family. This video is going to continue introducing the concepts of the boundary violations.
He was funny, he had a Porsche.
He didn't come asking for help or anything like that. He came offering to help.
He was always a part of the game.
He was very charismatic. People liked being around him.
A lot of talk and Mr. Cool.
Very respectful.
Kind of like a grandfather type.
If we were playing tag, he was playing. If we were climbing trees, he was climbing trees with us.
A real upstanding, good kid.
He was a natural leader.
He was from my community.
He made himself the person who solved problems for people.
He worked with children all of his life.
It's not healthy to expect the worst in people, but child sexual abuse and boundary violations can come from people that we know personally. More than 80% of sexual abuse incidents happen in isolated, one-on-one situations with a child.
Things like someone who's really intensely child-focused. Somebody who spends all of their time with children or seems to, latch on to one particular child. That would be a behavior that would be concerning.
They're getting that child to stay after school and get one-on-one work with their homework.
Part of what I think we really miss when we think about sexual abuse is that women are perpetrators too.
Through the grooming process, you're facing escalating abuse, escalating violence, and it's being alternated with rewards. Your uncle comes over, he asks you to sit on his lap, you sit on his lap, he gives you love, and that feels really good. And then the next day he comes over, you sit on his lap, he gives you love, and that feels really good, but then he puts his hand on your leg, right? And then you go out for ice cream.
So if you eliminate or reduce these isolated, one-on-one situations, you'll dramatically lower the risk.
All right. So paying special attention to a particular child. Abusers are looking for that child who appear vulnerable, hungry for attention, children who spend time alone or unsupervised, children who seem isolated. The child's then singled out for praise, gifts, special outings, or special favors. The offender promotes it as a special relationship. They may take pictures or video the child. They communicate excessively with the child via phone, text, email, or the internet. They offer to babysit, including sleepovers and overnights. Many of these behaviors allow the abuser to gain trust with the caregivers. So we talked about earlier that our abusers have to gain trust with the adults surrounding the child in order to have access to the child. So they become somebody who is integrally important to that family system, to that organization, to gain access. They break boundaries and rules. They might give the child treats, gifts, special privileges that are not allowed by their parents. In other cases, they could provide the children with drugs or alcohol, treat them as if they're older. They may test the child's boundaries by using inappropriate language or telling dirty jokes. They may show child pornography to initiate sexual interest and to normalize the behavior. Each of these things that they're doing is testing boundaries to see if the child at any point in time is going to resist, tell on them, and then they would be able to move on to a different target. So if sometimes you see situations or you hear about situations with, say, a Boy Scout leader, I'll use that as an example. There might be a group of boys. Then he realizes that only a A few of them would be targets, that kind of fit into the categories that we talked about before, that are needy, that are looking for that attention, that he could fulfill a role to them. And then as he breaks down the boundaries around the children in that small group, maybe only one or two children seems receptive to continuing, that relationship, because that child is looking for love and acceptance. They're overly physical. They break down children's natural defenses to physical touch. They insist on hugging and touching and kissing, even when the child objects. They play body contact games like tickling and wrestling. They encourage lap sitting, back rubs. They often craft situations for non-sexual or accidental touch. This would be, your mom's boyfriend is in the kitchen and they are washing dishes together. He's standing closer than necessary. He drops something on the floor, bends over to pick it up, grazes his hands up the back of her leg. They ignore a child's need for privacy by walking in on the child while they're in the bathroom or dressing. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know you were in here, as they linger in the doorway. Abusers can make sexual comments or observations about a child or child's developing body. So a lot of times when I'm working with families in our CPS or court cases, mom might have recognized that some things that the boyfriend did were inappropriate, but because he was helping out, he was providing monetary help to the family, paying rent, utilities, babysitting, allowing for her to be able to work and provide for her family, for the family. She kind of ignores some of these heebie-jeebie moments of like, I can't believe he just said that, but she doesn't stop him. And it starts with inappropriate sexual joke, and then it moves on to him commenting about the child, starting through puberty, or the way her body's changing. And when mom doesn't address each of these boundary violations, the boyfriend can continue going down the path with the child. Abusers often mask behaviors and abuse by creating this shared secret. They say, don't let your mom know that I let you watch that R-rated movie. It's going to be our secret. Abusers even use threats to keep kids from telling. If your parents knew, you'd get in a lot of trouble. Adults who seem excessively focused on children to the exclusion of healthy adult relationships should cause concern. That's a red flag. Again, this like too good to be true adult should cause us concern. We should pause to think about it. So one of the things that's been, happening in this post-COVID world is that, we've been watching families and communities really have to come together to help each other out. While our children are not in school, we may still have to go to work. So even if your child is being watched by someone you trust, like a neighbor and a friend, a family member, we really do want to keep in mind these different steps to protecting children, including minimizing opportunity. If majority of cases happen in one-on-one situations, then we need to prevent isolations, keep situations interruptible, and set expectations. We can dramatically reduce the risk of sexual abuse if we do this. Be clear with both the sitter and your kids about family rules so everyone knows the expectations and knows how to speak up if they aren't met. So make rules. The doors must remain open. Encourage activities and behaviors that include a whole group, and discourage individual pursuits. Consider making certain areas of the house off limits when you're away, like bedrooms or basements. Make sure the sitter knows you're going to be checking in with the kids. It might even be a good idea to circle back to the house and drop in when you're supposed to be out. You can ask a neighbor or family to drop by unannounced for you. You want to confirm boundaries with your kids. Remind them if anyone makes them feel uncomfortable, they can tell you. A phone call is a quick way to check in and gauge the situation. Ask the sitter to come over early so you can talk to them about these expectations, and let the sitter know that your kids know about body safety and boundaries. You don't keep secrets from each other. And so a lot of times being upfront with this information can be a deterrent to inappropriate behavior. So I don't know about your kids, but my kids are certainly on the internet a lot more than normal. So I'm usually that mom that makes a certain amount of time for PS4 playing. But while we're at home during COVID-19, I'm trying to work an 8-hour day. I've definitely been much more lax in my allowing him to use electronics. So here's some just general tips. We want to make sure our youth-serving organizations have and enforce communication policies that protect children. Teachers and other youth workers should not be communicating privately with children. They should be using group text messages and other communications that include parents. And we're going to talk about that more. Tell kids, don't give out your identifying information. Don't tell people your real name, your address, your neighborhood, your phone number, your school information, your extracurricular activities. If they're playing in an online format with people that are not just known to them, and that's the rules I have for my son, he's only allowed to play in restricted online formats where it's just his friends. He can't just be out there in the internet world. I don't let him play games that allow that. Tell your kids to let you know immediately if someone asks for their pictures or personal information. And review that a lot with your kids, because if something pops up in their YouTube video, they know they're not supposed to see it. They click off of it, but do they tell you about it? Do you talk to them? Be aware of what apps your kids are using. Know their capabilities. Is there a chat function? Are they chatting? Are they playing with strangers? Again, you can put those restrictions on. Set reasonable time limits on computers and smartphones. Have rules around where devices live and can be used. Once your kids go to bed, they're in their room. You're not walking in anymore to see who they're talking to. Put that, Kindle or their laptop or their PS4 in a public space so that they don't have access to it. Use your name and email for signing up for games and apps. This ensures you're the primary contact rather than your child. Talk to your kids about inappropriate questions and language. Smartphones and tablets, they have a location service feature that allows their devices to broadcast the location to the user's apps and contacts. You want to ensure that feature has been turned off. For older kids, you want to talk about sexting and cyberbullying. Explain the long-term consequences for sending sexual messages or pictures. You want to discuss the dangers and permanence of communication sent digitally, even if it claims to be private. And I know that this article that I had get this information from says older kids, but I think we need to be having these conversations from 6th grade on and earlier if you see that your kid peers are engaged in any of this type of information. Let your kids know you respect their privacy, but you are going to monitor the use, emails, photos, messaging, apps, all of those things. Last week we talked about this and the videos mentioned this, but we know more than 80% of sexual abuse incidences are happening in isolated one-on-one situations. We need to eliminate, reduce those. All encounters with our kids should be observable and interruptible. That was the language I taught you last week. So now that we have ideas of how perpetrators gain access, let's think about how we can protect our kids. We're paying attention to our gut feelings. We're acknowledging our child's resistance to a specific person. We don't force our kids to hug or kiss anyone. Talk to your kids about body safety. Let them know you're going to believe them. We're using the correct names for body parts. And we're changing the language regarding talking to our kids about secrets. We're using that word surprises instead. Remember, secrets are things that are not meant to be shared. A surprise is something that will be shared. So if we can eliminate the word secrets, when someone tells our kid this should be kept from your mom or your dad, then our kids will know that that is not okay because we don't have secrets in our household. So one of the things that I'm not going to cover today is talking about like issues with connectivity around the state. I definitely understand that technology issues are something that we have encountered across our state. I've seen the Department of Ed's response to addressing these concerns. I believe that it's at the forefront of the conversation when it comes to what distance learning will look like in our future. So today I'm just focusing on strategies to use when you do have the ability to connect through online schooling. I think it was fair enough to just put a slide out there. I understand connectivity has been an issue, but we're going to move forward just talking about strategies to use. So focusing on action items for online schooling, telehealth, home visiting, however it might play a role in your role with kids. During this time, we've had to completely change the way we interact with the children we're working with. In my office, my staff is using, so they're using like platforms like Zoom and FaceTiming with foster families and the kids that they're working with. And so we had to create policies around what does that look like. Lesson plans, activities, discussions, everything looks different than they did a few months ago. And as we tread through this new space, it's important to remember that in your physical classroom or office environment, you had rules, your agency has child protection policies, those still apply in your digital environment. We've got to tweak them and add new rules. So how do we minimize isolated, uninterruptible one-on-one time digitally? Maybe you have digital office hours. Your students can pop in to ask questions. I know some of us in higher ed or working in the high schools, we're having those digital office hours. If it's just you and one other student, what are some best practices that you could create? Most online or e-learning platforms give you the ability to record. Maybe you require a parent or a caregiver to be with them during digital office hours, depending on the age and material that you're discussing. My sister teaches at a university, and her digital office hours are open, so people can pop in and out. Anyone could pop into her office hours at any time, including her administration. We want to create a digital plan and send that digital plan to parents and caregivers so they know what to expect. They're comfortable with the rules. We want to include the roles and responsibilities of the child, the teachers, the parents, the terminology for online learning. What are the attendance guidelines? What are interaction expectations? What's the content, the timing, assessment, progress monitoring, specifics of the learning experience? All of these expectations should be in a digital plan. You need to get the parents and caregivers involved by educating them on how you and their child will be using the online platform. So do a Zoom meeting to explain how it's going to work, and then also put it in a written document so that they can refer back to it. Using videos to gauge, giving us this opportunity to use videos and see our kids is so important because we can use that as a gauge to understand how kids are feeling. What's their mental health look like? You might even get a picture of what's going on in the household. So just to use an example, I had an intern this past semester, and in January and February when we were in the office, she was punctual, dressed appropriately, looked, hair done, was professional in her appearance. And as COVID-19 went on and everything was changing for these students, so she was a senior in college, and her internship has been changed. The rules are changing constantly. She's getting all these emails, whether they're going to go back to school, whether they're not going to go back to school, whether they're going to have an internship, they're not going to have an internship. We would meet weekly in a staff meeting, and I watched a steady decline in her appearance, to the point where finally there was actually a staff meeting where she was in her bed logging in. She clearly still had pajamas on. Hair wasn't done. So I knew it was time for me to have a conversation with her to see what was going on. This gave me an opportunity to look into, where was her mental health? Where was her state of mind? And how might I be able to help? I think that could be used across all of our different ages and job responsibilities, to take a picture of what's going on with our kids, and get a better, feeling about how they're handling these changes. And what we chose to do is, in our staff meeting, we all went around the room. We talked about how we were being affected, what things looked like in our households, what we were doing to gain motivation, and we talked about getting exercise and getting up and getting a shower, pretending like it was a regular work day, having a set office space. All of those things are important for good mental health. We also want to have a reminder to our parents and students that the classroom technology rules still apply, so that just like in the physical classroom, in the virtual classroom, we're not taking pictures or posting images of our classmates or instructors to the web or to social media without permission. So a few times my son's classmates did some Zoom, just some opportunity for them to see each other and talk and share about what they were doing in isolation. And all of us parents discussed whether, taking a picture, we had the kids pose and do something silly. We were all okay with the photo before it was used. So the same type of rules should be applied in your virtual classroom. So new policies that you're creating, they might address where students and staff should be located when they join in the virtual classroom. So maybe you want to ensure that you're not having these virtual sessions from their bedrooms, that you want them in some type of common space in their house within earshot of parents. Again, this is going to be age appropriate, developmental appropriate. It's also going to be particular to a family. So I'm one of 7 children. There's a lot of barriers that would have happened in my household growing up if we were in a digital learning environment. And that is one that we had one computer for 7 children. Also, if I was a high school student with younger siblings running around, I might need to take my laptop or my tablet to my room to have privacy so I could hear what was happening within the learning opportunity. But my parents should be able to walk in, or whoever was taking care of us during that time, and they should be able to walk in and out of the room to check in what was going on. So your policies are going to need to be age appropriate and take into consideration some of those things. So we should have policies on how staff, faculty, students, how we're interacting with each other online. What is going to be the do and don'ts around language, the sharing of personal contact details, the sharing of materials during virtual classrooms. You want to remember, if you're sharing things like YouTube videos, that sometimes YouTube video commercials are not appropriate for your age group. We do have some of the hacking of videos and things like that. So you really want to be thinking about the material that you're sharing. What happens when a student is worried about someone, or they witness something online, an online platform that they're concerned about? Do they know how to report that? Do they know who they should be telling that to at the school? Do the parents understand that process? Do you have a policy that's been handed out for them to have somewhere to call? Do staff and faculty know what to do or who to contact if a child becomes distressed during a situation? For schools, are teachers able to contact the parents? Definitely in university settings. I know we have some higher ed people on the call. If your protocols don't allow you to contact parents, what other actions can you take if you're concerned about a student? Are you, as a staff person, able to block a user if that person starts being inappropriate? In the virtual, breakout session or session that you're having? Do you know how to report illegal content that's being shared, both internally and then externally to law enforcement? Are administrators able to enter the virtual classroom to monitor lessons? Can they just come in? Do they have to schedule that opportunity? Or are you just giving them the link to your classroom? So again, like I said, I taught at West Liberty this semester, and I have, I used Zoom was the platform that I used. And so all of the classrooms were set on the same link, and I just gave that link to my supervisor, and she could come in and out of any lesson I was giving. And then also think about what are the rules and policies you're going to have around recording of your classroom, that type of thing. Recording can be a good thing, and we should look into platforms that allow for recording so that, again, someone can go back and see what was happening in a session. So if you have a favorite platform that you're using or you used this last semester, please put it in the chat box so all of the participants can see the different types of platforms. Like I said, I use Zoom. My son, though, like I said, he was in 5th grade last year. They use Class Dojo. I know some of the other students or teachers used the Remind app. So just if you don't mind sharing, go ahead and put that out there, different platforms that you're using, just so people can see what's available. So on a recent article that was published in edweek.org, when teachers interact with students, it's most likely to occur via email. And my son had an email account that was created through our school system that I'm not sure was really used prior to COVID-19, but it did exist because it was his link to different passwords to different sites they used in the classroom. A majority of teachers also communicate by posting written messages online through online communications or video conferencing platforms. The use of Zoom has raised some big student data privacy and security issues, prompting, some districts. I know our court system didn't use Zoom for school-related businesses, although I think Zoom really took a proactive approach on working on their security issues. This article says that most educators didn't experience problems, and the survey that they did said 16% of teachers said that their district had a Zoom bombing incident. More than 1 in 5 elementary teachers, but only 6% of high school teachers have communicated with their students through like in-person social distancing opportunities like car parades and neighborhood wave and walks and other approaches. If you must send a text, use a group text. Include parents in the communication. You can also use the texting platforms and apps like Remind that keeps the communication within the platform so parents, students, and teachers don't share personal phone numbers. And that is also what the Class Dojo app did. So all the communication was within the app, whether it was a communication that went out to all the parents in the group, parents and kids can have a Class Dojo account as well, or if it was communication just between my son's teacher, myself, and my son. We don't use social media accounts, okay? I'm gonna tell you a quick little story. There was a substitute teacher, and this substitute teacher had met a student who was definitely showing signs of chaos within their family system, had behavioral problems, a lot of attention-seeking behavior, and she felt that the student was giving a cry for help. And so she then went and found him on social media and friended him and started checking in on him in a one-on-one situation through a social media app. She worked hard to establish a relationship with him, to let him know she cared about him, told him, he was special, that she hoped that I guess in some of their communication, he had alluded to some depression, some abuse and neglect happening at home. And she didn't feel like she had enough information to call CPS. She was trying to get more information by asking him specific questions. She used language that would be familiar with a teenager, so slang language. Ultimately, the child's mom saw the communication on the social media and was concerned about the way that the teacher was talking with her kid and reported it. She was fired. One, she was in violation of the no social media, relationship with children. But two, no one knows the intent you have with your communication except for the person doing the communication. So only this substitute teacher knew what the intent was behind building the relationship. She couldn't prove what her intent was good or pure. And the things that she was doing building rapport with this student also look like grooming. And so it's just a really good reminder for us to think about the fact that there are reasons that we have rules against using apps and social media to communicate, apps like Snapchat, where the communication disappears, or just friending somebody in a social media format. So make sure you have policies like that set up as well. When you use technology like Zoom, set up your chat parameters. Consider allowing only public chatting instead of allowing students to chat privately. You can, most of the platforms control that, and you want to look for a platform where you can control that. So just some ideas for administrators. It's vital to have your IT team ramp up the security on the digital platforms you plan to use for teaching. You might want to select a few of the platforms that you're okay with and that you've done the research on, and make sure that your IT team does a good job of learning them and teaching them. It reduces the hackers' ability to hack into the classrooms. Also helps your staff to understand the platform. So at West Liberty, they did constant trainings for us to practice using the online platforms. If your school does not have internet use policies, or your agency doesn't have these policies that are specific to staff and student and families, this would be the great time to create them. Make your network aware of them and train on these new policies. When you create digital learning plans for remote work, be aware of online resources and links that you share with your students. When you can, you might want to create your own content or share PDF files so that students aren't being brought out of the school's online system. As I said earlier, when you're sharing videos from YouTube, YouTube has ads and videos that aren't always appropriate. If you use a tool like Google Classrooms, it only shares the video. It doesn't take the kids out to the YouTube. You want to try and make your lesson plans as interactive as possible in order to keep the attention of students. And we know that that's been a difficult thing. Be flexible with class lengths and topics. You might have to make your assignments more guided. You might need to do some more prep and research that we didn't have to do before. Students who might be on their own devices, links and sites that would have been blocked on or schools' devices might not be blocked at home. So, be careful about students doing research themselves. It's got to be age appropriate when we're looking at these younger kids. Teachers might need to source research and check out some sites for online safety. So think about that online safety. Is this an opportunity to include digital safety as a continued learning experience? Since our students are having more screen time, consider having a lesson on digital safety. And then the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has NetSmarts, and I'm going to show you a little clip from it. It's an online safety education program created for kids. It provides age-appropriate videos and activities to help your kids be safer online, with the goal of helping children to become more aware of the potential online risk and empowering them to help prevent victimization by making safer choices on and offline. And then there's also opportunities for us to look at cyberbullying and other increased risks out there as well. So let me just show you a little clip from this NetSmarts untitled.org. And I'll tell you, my son, again, is going into 6th grade. Some of these videos, he was kind of like eye rolling about, but he was engaged enough to say, oh, Mom, that was a little cheesy, but I think I want to go on and watch the next one so I can find out what happens in the, in the story. So it was engaging enough, and he was definitely learning and able to regurgitate the material back with me. So this is just a 30-second little clip.
I don't like it here. We've got to get home. But how? The tube was destroyed. We know a lot about having fun and staying safer online. We could show you how.
Why would someone want to trick me online?
How do we know which one to trust? There's no way back to the NetSmart's neighborhood.
So again, that's netsmart.org, NETSMARTZ.org. And I learned about that during COVID-19 on a different training that I was doing. Someone had shared that. And so I really did enjoy going to that website and looking at the material that's available. All right. So I just want to put this out there. It's a challenge that many of our schools are facing. Okay, more than a fifth of students are not participating in school, with truancy rates in higher poverty communities. The last couple of weeks, we've talked about that, getting eyes on kids that aren't participating in food drop-offs or online schooling programs or picking packets up. 2 weeks ago, we had the roundtable where we heard from communities across the state and the really great ways that they are responding to our most vulnerable students. Also from an article in Ed Week, I see that about 21% of students nationwide are essentially truant during the coronavirus closures. They're not logging in, they're not making contact, et cetera. The percentages are highest in districts where more than 3/4 of students are from low-income families. Nearly 1 in 3 students in those communities are not participating in remote learning, compared with 12% in districts where there are 1/4 or fewer students living in poverty. Given that income is strongly associated with opportunities to learn, this means that students who are most likely to need the online education and talking to teachers are going to be receiving the least amount of instruction, opening up the possibilities that closures in schools widen existing gaps. So obviously, I mean, school's a distraction. Our kids that are from these high risk neighborhoods, or they're in abuse and neglect situations at home, school was a distraction from the problems at home. Now they are stuck at home in that chaos, and it's really hard to expect that those students are the ones that are doing their academic work packets. When they're worried about eating, they're worrying about taking care of their siblings, that type of thing. So, just thinking back to the conversations we've had the past couple of weeks, how do we access those kids so that we can engage them and make sure they're doing okay? I just felt like I couldn't do this training without bringing that up again and talking about how important it is. So how do you learn more? Like I said, this was new ground for me to cover, just like it's new ground for you guys to cover. And I really started looking at all the information that's currently out there. And honestly, there's not a ton of information in regards to the creation of these policies and procedures yet. And so I think we get to be on the cutting edge of making sure that our schools here in West Virginia, our organizations and agencies that are serving children, are looking at the development of child protection strategies when in virtual learning environments. So some of the places, again, that I've looked at that I encourage you to look into, that Prevent Child Abuse West Virginia, as well as Prevent Child Abuse America, Darkness to Light, I put the WVU Extension Office up there because a lot of extension agencies are trained in darkness to light trainings, or they might be able to point you in the direction of who in your community is. You have partners and prevention teams across the state, family resource networks in your counties. You have child advocacy centers and CASA programs as well. So I encourage you to go and do as much research as you possibly can to start developing and implementing these policies in your agencies and schools. All right, so I've left time for questions and answers because this is material that is so new to us. So I'm gonna put up the next slide, which is just my contact information as we start to look through some of those questions.
Okay, Susan, there are some that are in the question and answer box that have also been put into the chat box that seem like they may have been meant for participants. So I'm going to work my way here. But one says, I am a teacher and we're required to use Google Voice to call parents to keep our personal numbers private. Several parents want to give me their child's private number. I did not feel comfortable. What would be a good way to have parents understand the Google Voice numbers is for parents only or parent with child?
Yeah, I think that it's a great opportunity for education to the parent, why you shouldn't have their child's number and why they should be engaged in the conversations regarding their child's education with you. Yeah, I just think it's a good opportunity for educating that parent. And very simply, you can say, part of our policies and procedures that I don't have, contact via your child's cell phone number.
Okay. Some of them are regarding digital plans. Somebody asked early on, does anyone have a digital plan outlines already created for pre through K learners? So if you do have any response to that, please feel free to answer in the chat box if you can answer that question for her. I'm not familiar with, but I will say that I did ask Barb to post a link in there from commonsense.org. They do have a ton of information broken down in age-appropriate and developmentally appropriate ways. That is a website that I use anytime a parent asks questions about whether or not their child's old enough for a video game, for an app. It does a great job of reviewing. So please, if you have never checked out commonsense.org, that's another great platform that has a ton of information that's on there. Somebody asked, in regards to the platform everyone uses, did any of your districts have set guidelines for teachers when communicating using online sources? So maybe, Susan, do you want to speak to what the Department of Ed is doing currently, because there aren't policies in place? We can't directly answer that question, but do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, what I can do is just say that I know that there's a COVID-19 2020 response team that has been assembled at the Department of Ed, and maybe, going through your administrators in your school systems to ask them questions, because this is such new ground to cover. I think that your administrators would love to know about some of the questions that you have, because what I'm hoping that happens is if we end up needing some type of digital, some type of online schooling in the fall, or we see rolling setbacks, or as we create any type of policies that will help us in the future, that we can have more structured way of doing things. Because in what happened here, where every single classroom did something different, is how we invite issues and problems. And I'd like to see some more consistency happening across at least counties, using platforms. My son never saw his teacher again after the shutdown occurred. We had pickup. He saw other teachers, but he had no online Google Classroom, no Zoom meetings, no anything with his classroom after that. And I just think we're missing out on the opportunity to keep kids engaged, and especially when it comes to child protection strategies. So I would encourage you, with the fact that I know that they've assembled this COVID-19 response team to develop policies and procedures, reach out to your administrators, tell them the questions that you have, let them know, the things that would help you be the best teacher or counselor that you possibly could be.
Okay, now I've moved to the chat box and I have one. I run a boxing gym where kids need my personal number. Boxing is also not a school sport. I find myself in several catch-22s with this. How do I resolve this?
Great. So one of the examples I use a lot of times is talking about a pitching coach that came to me. I was doing trainings with baseball associations, and we're looking at how do you do one-on-one trainings and stuff with teenagers who are their parents are paying you to set up this communication, that type of thing. And so my response was, why does it have to be one-on-one? Why can't the text messages that you're sharing between your boxing students or your pitching students, why can't those text messages also include the parent? And so anytime that you're doing the texting, I would encourage you with that. Now, phone calls, I understand some of the phone calls would be, without a parent present. And I think that they should be limited and careful.
The same gentleman indicated that he is never one-on-one. So
right.
Let's see here. Some kids don't feel comfortable with videos. Do you recommend making video mandatory for child protection?
Meaning, let me just make sure I understand the question. The making videos, so like doing like Zoom conversations or Google Classroom where a video is present. Is that what the question means?
That's what I think they're referring to, yes.
I think, I'll tell you from a parent's perspective, I think it would be great that there is at least some type of check-in opportunity where they're seeing you and seeing your face. It also holds them accountable for getting dressed and sitting up at a table and having, good learning, good learning points ready to go. But I don't think all of it has to be that way. Asking them to complete an assignment, to email it back to you, those types of things are okay as well. But I do think some video is good because you're able to see what's happening within the course or the home system.
Okay, this question, hang on, it moved. This question may need to be answered by some of you actually within the chat box. Are teachers in your communities making contacts over the summer, because our last day was yesterday? So I know in my area, teachers are making contact in different ways, but as we know, each county functions differently. So feel free, if you are teachers in the chat box, to answer that. Susan, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what all the counties are doing statewide. I can only tell you in Ohio and Marshall County that there does seem to be some continuation of contact. There's food distribution that's occurring, and of course that's only going to touch a certain number of families. That we've had some Zoom meetings already because my son's transitioning to middle school. They didn't get to do like the middle school walkthrough and things like that. They didn't get to have their 5th grade class trip. There are things that are happening this summer as the restrictions are lifted so that there is some contact, but that's pretty specific to my son's situation, not necessarily in general. So yeah, again, I think that those are great questions, and maybe some of the participants can chime in.
Some of the participants have chimed in, and I do recommend you guys can go ahead and copy and paste some of those responses into a document so that you can save them. Do I see any more questions for Susan specifically?
I just want to say thanks to those of you that put out ideas for the different platforms that you're using, from FaceTime to Remind app, Seesaw. Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Conference Now, Google Voice, Class Dojo, Remind, WebEx, Facebook pages for mass communications, that's great, Blooms, Office 365, and then someone said that moving forward, they're going to have a school-wide platform, which that's what I'm hopeful for. So I have I have friends and my sisters, they teach in different schools, so I have a familiarity with Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts, and they have school-wide platforms. So I'm hopeful that we also have some type of school-wide platform. I think that would be fantastic. Schoology. Teachers making YouTube videos. Yeah, my sister-in-law actually has her own YouTube channel now. Crazy. Times have changed so much. But she was making videos. They're on her own channel. Then her students can access them.
Last chance for any questions. Lots of great responses there. We really appreciate that. Sharing information is so valuable for all of us. If we have no more questions for Susan, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your time this morning. Her contact information is still being shared with you on the screen, so please make sure to write that down. But you're more than welcome to also contact any of us at a point in time, and we're happy to share her contact information. Thank you so much for your time today, Susan. We really, really appreciate it. No more questions? Okay, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. This is the time where I remind you that it's important for you to have your name on the sign-in sheet. Evaluations will be emailed to you. Conference certificates will be emailed to you. In a moment here, I'm going to hand it over to Selena Vickers to go over any information for graduate credit. We want to remind you that next week is week 5 in the training series. Robert Peters, senior attorney from Zero Abuse Project, will be talking about when children trust you. So he's going to be talking about how to respond when a child discloses sexual abuse to you. What do you tell the child? Do you know your legal obligations? How can you respond without jeopardizing criminal investigation and the child's safety? So we hope that you'll join us again next week. For those of you who are not staying online for information on the graduate course, we'll see you next week. Thank you for attending. Bye-bye. Okay, Selena, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Awesome. All right.